Yeah, we were, colleagues in earlier days when I was in Max Essig's lab. He and the woman who got her doctorate with me in Max's lab, we shared an office, and she went off to Gallo's lab, and I went back to CDC. And when this thing, because I had respect for Bob and and I was pulling Max and I were pulling him into. He could care less about the AIDS at that time, and we needed the help of because there was no resources at all to deal with it, and we needed his lab help and expertise, and he was just totally not interested. And then he started getting interested, and he just started. He's not a collaborator. As long as you play his in his team as he the captain, he's fine. But should you have any broader view other than his personal glory and your personal glory, then this was not a scientific pursuit in any way. This was a building my ego or lab or whatever it is. But it was me from Bob Gallo's side. I didn't finish the story, but when Ann went down there, we had so much problems with him initially. And so I called Ann and I said, look, how do you deal with this guy? And she gave me the most accurate advice. He said, you have to treat him like about a 7-year-old, and everything's fine. And I said, we're adults dealing with a very important epidemic here, and I don't have time to deal with a 7-year-old. I mean, it was just bright guy, very self-destructive. And he made a huge mistake on this thing. And if it weren't for his incredible pursuit of power and the Reagan administration, he would have lost all credibility in the scientific community just for stealing somebody's virus. I mean,
what do you mean pursuit of power in the Reagan administration?
Well, Reagan they had done so little on AIDS that they were willing to do anything with Bob Gallo's, quote, discovery, and they pushed this whole thing up outside of what we were trying to do to make it a better scientific thing. That we had it all planned out to do this quietly and give credit to the French and credit to everyone at the same time. And then they had this press conference in total violation of what the agreement was that we had in Paris. And I think Bob maybe have wanted that anyway, but he got pushed by the Reagan administration that wanted to do something on AIDS finally. And if they ignored the whole disease and literally told us to just close CDC's lab down, we don't care about it. There's a bunch of gays, who gives a shit? I mean, that was really their whole story. And so by this time it was getting to be they couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a bad disease. And so the whole thing that they rested their political response was, well, we discovered the virus. And so they pushed Bob further, I think, than Bob would even wanted to, having this press conference instead of having a joint release of really CDC, Institute Pasteur, and NCI. That was the plan. And pissing everybody off. But I think typical of Bob, once the secretary wanted him to do that, and then he got into it and thought it was good. And then I think afterwards apologized. It was a bad thing. But by that time he just went crazy, and attacked everyone he could find, me and everyone else, and the French. And yet the reality is, as time went on, it was clear that probably Mika Popovic in his lab just took the French virus and threw it into these cultures. And since it was adapted for cultures, it was the French virus. And then they stole electron micrographs. I mean, it was just horrible. Any other person probably would have been kicked out of science. But he was so aggressive, and he will never give up.
So if it wasn't for his power, do you think he would have gotten off the charges? Because I know they found him guilty of scientific misconduct twice.
Yep.
And then they let him go.
Yep. Very bizarre. And that's probably pure Republican politics, that they did not want it to stay in them too. So however this guy was, in any other scientific parameter, would have had his hand slapped at best and kicked out at worst. And he eventually got moved out of NIH, but it took Hellbombers to do that.
Is it true that only a handful of people were allowed access to Gallo's virus for research?
Yes.
And that numerous restrictions accompanied the virus?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Bob Gallow's philosophy was to have people to whom he would give the virus be in his own control, so that any information that came out of that would come through him, so that he got all the information. Indeed, often put his name on publications and would, quote, collaborate with them, but it was more of a enforced collaboration than necessarily one that one would generally have in science. I think you have to choose ethical people you want to work with, and that he had violated that in at least my definition, the ethical standards of people I want to work with.